is to actually start doing it and really to extract the most value from this tool. The real missing piece will be to do it in a collaborative way, in a community-wide way, and to share the data. And in that sense, it is very much like the Aggregate protocol, which has been so valuable because you have many, many people doing very similar things and aggregating data and sharing them and presenting a regional-wide view of what's going on because they're cooperating. And I think that that's an excellent model for where we should go and what we can do with mosaics. Now, what I've put up here on the title slide are 3 mosaics that I think represent these evolutionary phases of this technology. The first one from Jim Hello made this in 2001. It was actually in National Geographic because it was so revolutionary at the time. This is an early one we did, sort of representing the developmental phase of this technology in 2004. And I think here's a recent one that I think you'll see represents the maturity of this technology at this point. Look for these because we're going to see them again during the talk. All right, just in case you haven't seen this before, what is an underwater? What is a landscape mosaic? Okay, a mosaic is a set of overlapping pictures taken of the seabed. The idea being that if you are close to the seabed, you reduce the attenuation due to light in the water column. You also achieve a high spatial resolution in the image. But you're limited in the total area that you can see in one photograph. So if you take many adjacent or overlapping photographs and stitch them together, you can retain the advantages of being close to the seabed and having a high resolution picture, but also take advantage of the fact that you can cover a large area, in one view. And that lets you do lots of new things, which is what we'll talk about. Let me just show, oops. There we go. Okay. Just a few. I'll just flip through a few of these pretty pictures again, in case you've never seen things like this before, just to give you a feeling for the rich detail and the powerful information contained in all these. These are all what we would call two-dimensional mosaics or top-down views. And of course, nowadays we can do 3D views. Here, this is a 2D planar view, and then looking in the direction of this black arrow, this is an oblique view of this site, just taken in 2 different angles, okay? So this is just mostly to show that there's an example of these things and the rich detail contained in them. Now, it's important when thinking about this technology, I think, to not get hung up on any one piece of it. There's really, we've come to think of this, I've come to think of this as a 4-stage pipeline, okay? Starting with image acquisition, planning and designing how you're going to collect your images. That's step 1. Step 2 is mosaic creation. How do you take those many, many raw images and stitch them together into a single view, a single composite, either 2D or 3D view of the seabed? That's step 2. Step 3 is information extraction. Okay, you have this nice mosaic. What are you going to do with it? What information are you going to pull out of it, and what are you going to use it for? And then the 4th thing that is often forgotten, but yet I think will be is really the key piece that's going to put us over the hump here, is how are you going to make sure that this data is shared and spread widely and used in a collaborative way? Another crucial point to this is it's very easy with remote sensing of any kind to get caught up in the images, however they're acquired, and think that that's the answer to the problem. But in reality, these do not exist alone. Okay, the images will never be the complete answer. As anyone who's ever used satellite imagery or any kind of remote sensing goes, you always need other types of data that are complementary to this to really answer problems. But once you have those things, then together, the information that you extract from the mosaics and the information you have from complementary data sources, those can be used for action, decision-making, knowledge, and so forth. And that's really where the monitoring part comes in. Then, of course, repeat as we learn. So what I'm going to do now is walk through some of the decisions that you need to make at each of these steps 1 through 3, and then present a little bit of a vision of what we can do together as a community in step 4 to really make this a powerful tool. Okay, step one of the pipeline is image acquisition. And I just put up here, I say this is not an exhaustive list of cameras that you could or should use. These are just the ones that I've used over the years. And I just want to point out two things. First is the technology from, say, 2000 to 2009 or 10 evolved in a very rapid way. And all of these cameras suffered from some pretty debilitating limitation that really prevented them from being just the right answer for this. Well, about 2009 or 2010, there's been a generation of cameras that I think are good enough in terms of resolution and battery power and image quality that you can actually, and data storage, that's the other key part, that you can actually capture enough images in a reasonable way that they become functional. Not to say that you have to use these two, there are lots of other ones, and not to say that there's one that's perfect. There are trade-offs to be made. Things like, what do you need to acquire? What's your budget, all right? But in general, the technology has really evolved rapidly and is now, I think, mature for the camera. Platforms, how do you actually take that camera and get your images? There's lots of ways to do this, okay? The simplest way is with a diver to swim the camera and capture images. But there's also other things you can do depending on what you need. One of the first modifications we made was to use two cameras, one with a wide field of view and one with a narrow field of view, in order to be able to capture even higher resolution at one time. Another thing that you can do is to stick a camera on something like an AUV, okay, if you need to go very deep or you need to cover a very large area. If you don't have one of those, and you still need to cover a very large area, you can do it in other ways. You can use a pole that a diver can swim with multiple cameras on it and cover a larger area in a shorter amount of time. You can tow such a thing behind your boat. You can actually stick a bunch of them if you need to go deeper, and you don't have one of these, you can put them on scooters, okay? The point is, there's no one right way to do it. The right way to do it is the one that lets you get the data for the site that you care about. And this needs to be thought through as you're planning your surveys. Okay, the second part of the pipeline is mosaic creation, and this is how these software works, and the mathematics behind it is a semester-long course in itself. Okay, but the point the takeaway point that you should have in your mind, because this is relevant to acquiring data, is what is the one key thing you really need when you acquire data is lots of overlap between your images. Okay. In the old days, when people did this by hand with air photographs, you wanted minimum overlap because it was very labor intensive to find matching points between the images. So you really wanted to find the minimum number of matching points. You wanted very little overlap. Nowadays, with a computer, you can get lots and lots of points very easily, but and you need those because statistically, they're not as good as manually matched points. Okay. So anyway. The point being, you need lots of overlap. And the illustration of the need for this, actually, is to contrast Jim's Bloody Bay Wall mosaic, which took him 10 days of dive time, 14 months to assemble in Photoshop, and consisted of about 150 images. But was beautiful, by the way. You can still find this online. This is a spectacularly gorgeous product, okay? But it's just not practical for coral reef monitoring. So that was our whole objective, was to make something that was more practical. By 2004, with our software, we could acquire something that covered a larger area in just one dive, run it through a computer in about 12 hours, but we needed about 10 times as many images to create the same sort of level of detail. Nowadays, we can do the same sort of area, with two cameras. We can run it in faster. We can get full 3D output. That's fine. But the point being, there was dramatic improvements in this technology, the software side of it, from about 2000 to 2010. In around 2010, the first commercial products started to become available. They're now widely available. Probably lots of you have used them, and this problem is pretty much solved. Okay. Now, step 3, information extraction. Again, there's many ways to pull information out of these mosaics. Some of them are just a visual assessment, just looking at them, okay? You can, and some of them, maybe you want percent cover, that's another very common thing. maybe you want to digitize them. There's also multiple options for the software that you can do for each of these steps. It's not for me to prescribe to you whether you should use, ArcInfo or QGIS or Photoshop to do your digitization. I think that those are all valid tools. The point being, what I want you to realize is that you can do that with whatever tool is appropriate for you. An important point about information extraction is this idea of automated classification. Okay? This is one example. This is a tool that we're developing, and lots of people are working on this. Here's a true color section of this mosaic. Here's one that's been classified. It's still a work in progress. It's coming. It's going to happen. But my evidence that it's not here yet, is just that I haven't seen any papers using this to actually monitor things yet. All right, one example. This is a visual assessment of hurricane damage. Early example from 2007. We saw a huge slumping off the side of this roof. And this is something that was this block, there's a diver. This is something that was too big to capture in one image. You needed this large scale view to see it. I'm skipping quickly here. Groundings are another early use of this technology. This was an early method where we stitched together 19 mosaics to cover an area of about almost 5,000 square meters. This was used to help stabilize fragments and begin planning for a recovery process. It was then used in a more quantitative way. We did repeat mosaics over the next several years to monitor how outplants grew. This was an example of point counting. You can see that you can get quantitative data out from this. This is another example of restoration in Belize, where GLeason has used this tool to get, again, quantitative data on percent cover over time. Finally, an important thing is fate tracking. You can actually monitor individual colonies very well with this because you don't have to tag them. You can find them. This is what you might get from a photo quadrat, but if you, we probably don't have time to show this video, but the idea being that you can track individual colonies without having to tag them and find them otherwise in this sort of because if you want to take a look, go to the website and you can actually run this yourself. Right? I'm behind, so I'm going to come on. Okay. Finally, Brooke used this sort of tool to monitor over 4,200 colonies over 6 years, which is a huge sample size. Right? That's a very difficult thing to do with tag and water. Cost effectiveness. We have done a cost effectiveness study of this. I won't crush you with the tables for that right now, but the point being, the more things you can pull out, the more cost effective it becomes. Okay. All right. Okay, you're cutting me off. Okay. All right. 30 seconds. Let me get to the conclusions here. Conclusions are: we have stunning progress in this technology over the last 20 years. And we have made huge progress in the first 2 or 3 steps of this technology. The last one we need is to work together as a community to standardize data sharing for this. And I hope to talk with as many of you as I can about that in the time we have remaining at this meeting. And these are just 3 examples of how the technology has evolved over time. Thank you for your attention.